individuals were given the rights through God to themselves to be the ones that dictated your rights and your liberties, your freedoms, your maneuvers, your buy and your leave. But what Thomas Jefferson said is that there's a natural right theory. And the natural right theory is the relationship between the individual to the Creator that gives you that life, that liberty, that pursuit of happiness. But we have to be careful, because if all of a sudden we stop believing that those inalienable rights come through natural right theory from our Creator, then all of a sudden that man is the grantor of those rights, then man can also be the taker of those rights, which is the difference between liberty and then tyranny. So when you think about Thomas Jefferson, what he set forth a document in the Declaration of Independence. They brought all of the grievances against King George, divine right theory. It says, you're violating our liberty, and we need to separate those bonds. And then when we came back to our Constitution, and it was written, the Constitution could not be ratified until what occurred? The Bill of Rights. Those first 10 amendments that talked about your individual rights. And see, that's what liberty is. And so when we talk about our personal liberty, which is something that I think we must come to hold and understand, number one in our personal liberty, First Amendment right, our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression, the right that you have to petition your government for redress of your grievances. But it should not be that you bring up your petition against the government for redress of grievances, and all of a sudden the government decides that it will unleash its power against you, the individual. See, that is what happened in 2010, when a constitutional conservative grassroots movement stood up, and through the power of their voices, you sent people up to Capitol Hill in 2010, because you said that there has to be a different way. We cannot live under the overarching tyranny that comes from the federal government. As a matter of fact, most people don't even understand or don't even remember what Tea Party stood for. TEA, taxed enough already. Which, if you think about it, and you go back and you understood what the Founding Fathers were rising up against, that was one of the fundamental things that caused them to stand up and say, we don't believe in the taxation without the representation. But now we have gotten to the point where we have onerous taxation with very little appropriate representation. But see, what government said is that you don't really have that liberty to stand up and petition us for the Now, I hope that's Domino's Pizza. Now, I have my Mac going on here. I was in a groove, and the phone rang, and now I'm all messed up. Because you know I'm from Georgia, and you know I got a real short train of thought. No, but the thing is this. Then the government realized that we cannot allow the voice of liberty to stand. And so what did they do? They went to the IRS, and they unleashed the tyranny of government to suppress your personal liberty, the ability for you through your speech, through your expression, to redress those grievances to government. And see, you cannot cower away. You cannot allow them to believe that they can do that and get away with it. What you have is incredible, because there are two things that make this a republic. It is the rule of law. It's the sovereignty of the individual. And when you surrender your sovereignty as an individual, then you will find yourself being enslaved. And that is not what our founding fathers meant for us to be. Our founding fathers meant for us to be a free people. And the other thing about our liberty is what we see happening with our religious liberty. You know, it's so interesting. I'm sure that somebody's going to write and say, how can they have this kind of meeting in a church? Isn't that a violation of separation of church and state? Humma, 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 dee, tap dance all over the place. But the next time someone says that to you, you must reach inside your inner breast pocket and pull out that simple little document, Declaration, Constitution, and say, Can you please show me where it says separation of church and state?
Right.
Because it's not there. You see, one of the great things about liberty is that you have to educate yourself. And see, so many of us are not educating ourselves on the fundamental principles and values and doctrine of the United States of America. Because it's very simple. You then look them in the eye and say, separation of church and state was basically just a concept, an idea that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury, Connecticut Baptist Convention that said that we in America would not have a head of state who was also the head of church. We will have a clear and distinct separation. But the reason why Jefferson wanted that clear and distinct separation, because remember why people came here to these shores? Because of persecution in England. They wanted to make sure that the head of state could not persecute people because of their religious beliefs. Now fast forward 238 years later and look at where we are today. The state that is persecuting people for their religious beliefs, the state that is telling you, if you're a small business owner, your religious beliefs, your freedom of religion, your free exercise thereof, means nothing as opposed to the politicized ideological privileges that we want to impart to others. Think about out in Oregon when a baker loses their business because they said, we'll bake you a cake. We'll give you whatever service you want. But we don't want to be a part of this event in your life because it goes against our religious beliefs. A person that owns a photography studio in New Mexico that says, I'll be happy to take pictures, but I do not want to take pictures or portraits as part of this event that you want to have in your life because of my religious beliefs. And then the state comes down and brings a fine against them and crushes them and they lose their business. A pizza owner in Indiana says, I'll be happy to serve anyone that comes in here, but I would not want to cater to this ceremony, this event, because it goes against my religious beliefs, and he gets death threats. But let me tell you about the power and the strength of people that believe in religious liberty. That pizzeria owner, last time I counted, had over $850,000 in donations to make sure that his business continues on. You know, one of the great traditions at the University of Tennessee is that before every football game, they're on Rocky Top in Knoxville, Neyland Stadium, beautiful venue right on the Tennessee River. A local minister is called in to give a prayer before the football game. And how do I know that that tradition continues? Because I went back to Knoxville for the Tennessee-Alabama football game, and it was still going on. But yet there was a group out of Wisconsin called the Freedom from Religion Foundation that actually sent the University of Tennessee a letter that said, you will cease and desist this practice of praying before football games. Now see, I remember growing up in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Grady High School, and I played football. And we didn't have all this high-speed gear and everything like that. There was no such thing about targeting. I mean, you were not a tough football player unless you did try to hit someone head on. And even in high school, before every game, at Grady Stadium, a pastor would come down and pray over that football game. I don't remember catastrophic injuries. I don't remember anyone getting carted off that field paralyzed. See, there's something about the power of prayer. There's something about that freedom of religion. There's something about the founding fathers who prayed over this nation. And they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They did not ask for man's providence. They asked for divine providence in establishing this great nation.
Amen.
If we forget who we are in our religious freedom, see, there's a reason we sing God bless America, not government bless America. And if we ever get to the point where we stop singing it that way, then the blessings of liberty that have been bestowed upon this great nation. Because how many of you all here were in the military? Thank you for your service.